After mobilising to save the crew of the Manawanui as it sank near shore on Sunday, many in Tafitoala village stayed home this week, unsure if their fishing grounds are safe to return. Mayor Taloailiono Vasasou says people are still coming to terms with what happened.
On Sunday morning, our village was having Sunday school lessons when we saw and took photos of the vessel sinking. But before sinking, it caught fire.
New Zealand's first naval loss since World War II, the Manawanui was mapping a reef when it ran aground and sank, taking 900 tonnes of fuel down with it. It now sits 150 metres below the surface, threatening fragile coral reefs and the marine ecosystem relied on by fishers.
We are fearful. The concern is that in case there is an oil spill, it will impact our ecosystem.
But the worst harm may be avoided with quick action.
It's a lot lighter than fuel oil on container ships, for instance, which tends to be quite heavy and not very good in the sense that it's got a lot of impurities in it. So I think if there's any good news here, that is that with the lighter oil, lighter fuel, it will evaporate off.
Samoan authorities have reported small oil leaks from the vessel, but no spillage onto reefs or on shore. Professor Battershill says with each low tide, the risk to coral and fish will return.
Our biggest concern is that the marine life, such as the coral reefs, have been impacted due to the ship running aground, but we also have a clam sanctuary and other fish species. We are also concerned it might impact our livelihoods. Our village has many fishermen, and seafood is a favourite among our elderly.
A crucial effort is now underway to save a reef and a community. Angus Mackintosh, ABC News.
Well, thank you for having me. Yes, it's always danger when you're doing survey operations, especially close to shore, as the vessel was doing. Typically, you would use remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, or even smaller launches launched from the vessel. In this case, it appears as if they were using the main vessel and its onboard systems to scan. And what probably happened was there was a loss of power or a loss of maneuverability. They touched ground, and unfortunately, they were not able to pull themselves off the reef before they started taking flooding on board.
So in other words, you believe that they pretty much skipped a step?
Well, they did put the ship in risk. Anytime you're operating close to shore, puts you in a little bit of extremis. And there's a very thin margin for error whenever something goes wrong, and that seems to be what happened here.
Now, the listing boat caught fire many hours after running aground. What could have caused the fire when there was no one on board?
The ship took a very hard list over to one side, so if there was any machinery operating, even stoves in the galley, could have led to that fire on board. I think the fire was incidental to what was happening. The ship had already taken a perilous heel. It had already begun flooding. There was really not many options left when the ship's captain decided to go ahead and prioritize the crew over the ship and get them off.
Well, speaking of priorities, New Zealand has begun a cleanup operation. Can you just describe to us what that entails and how critical it is to get it done as quickly as possible?
So the biggest thing right now is going to be containment, trying to keep whatever fuel is coming off the vessel from getting onto the beach and creating more pollution or more issues with the marine environment. Second, they're going to have to get the fuel off the vessel itself. That could involve divers. Third, it may involve a full salvage and lifting of the vessel. But for right now, what they're looking at is trying to get booms and containment out there. They're going to have to make a decision about dispersing, using dispersants to try to break up the chemicals. The problem with that is it could break down the oil and put it on the bottom. It's a lot of factors at play here. And it's really going to be up to Samoa to decide what they want to do since this is their waters.
I'm just curious, you mentioned that divers are able to actually collect the oil underwater. How is that even done?
They would go in with a system of hoses and piping and try to actually pump the fuel off the vessel. This has been done in other areas. The problem you're going to have off the southern shore of Samoa is the surf and water is a little bit more dangerous than doing it in an enclosed harbor. So it really have to be done in ideal circumstances to do it. It's not an easy operation. You're going to need a lot of specialized equipment that will have to be brought into the area. So it will not happen fast.
Yeah, Samoan locals, Sal, in the area say that they have seen evidence of oil along coastlines, but New Zealand hasn't quite confirmed that. Either way, how likely is it that there will be a major oil spill from what you've observed so far?
You will see a spill, unfortunately. I mean, there's nothing that can be done to prevent it. The good thing would be what type of fuel the ship was using. Fuel in onboard vessels today have gotten a lot cleaner and lighter. There's reports this may be a form of biodiesel, which is a much lighter type of fuel than we saw in some previous wrecks where we saw heavy oil. That is good because it will disperse faster in the atmosphere when it hits the sunlight. However, the big thing is going to be get some containment booms up to try to keep that oil offshore and off the reefs.
And what are we expecting in the coming days, given what you've told us so far about what's needed to be done? What can we expect authorities to be doing?
I think the big thing is setting up monitoring stations to ensure that the oil is not getting onto that shore and onto the reef. I think, of course, Samoa, along with New Zealand, is going to want to figure out what exactly transpired and happened here to cause the vessel to come ashore and ground. Obviously, there'll be a court of inquiry being done by New Zealand, but Samoa will also be involved in that to ensure that there is no damage being done to its environment and potential fishing and basically rights within its EEZ.
Yes, you've said that it's pretty much inevitable that there will be a spill of sorts, but what sort of impact will that have on the local marine environment and wildlife?
Well, it'll be an impact, obviously, directly, especially for fishermen and people who derive their wealth and basically sustenance from the sea. And this is a really crucial area. This is a very vibrant reef. That we know that this has got a huge inhabitants of sea turtles in the area. So a lot of priority is going to be given to do what they can immediately on hand. What you may see is some flying in of some more equipment, some containment, some methods to really prevent that oil from getting out. Unfortunately, with the vessel capsizing and going over, there is the potential for oil to be slowly leaking out. And that'll be the other element here, is assessing what is the oil leakage from the vessel. Do they have enough on scene to contain what is coming out? Hopefully, it'll be a small enough amount that they'll be able to handle it until they can get a larger salvage operation up and going.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that salvage operation. New Zealand is trying to do that. Is that doable in this case, given the depth at which this wreckage is at?
That's going to be a big one because, again, the main salvage vessel in the New Zealand Navy is this vessel. So they're going to have to bring in commercial assets or other naval assets into the area. Obviously, it's far from where a lot of these ships would be. So they're going to have to bring it in very quickly to start assessing it and minimizing the impact they have. The ship grounded on the reef, but we know it slid off the reef and went into deeper water. There's going to need to be an assessment exactly the location of the vessel. Because of the type of environment on the bottom there, the ship could slide into deeper water, and which may actually mitigate the situation a little bit. There's going to have to be a large ongoing assessment of it, what exactly it is and how the ship is actually lying on the ocean bottom.
So best case scenario, they get the ship up, they get the wreckage there. How would this then help with the investigations?
Well, obviously, they'll be able to recreate what happened. We know from the images we saw, the ship had hoisted its restricted ability to maneuver signals, which says it was probably in conducting the survey at the time. They'll be able to assess what exactly happened, the damage to the vessel. Even though you're charting an area that needed to be charted, reefs do change, the bottom terrains. There's been a lot of seismic activity in that area recently, so we could have had a shifting of seamounts. It's really not clear what caused it. There's allegations of, obviously, of a power failure, maybe issues with fuel. They'll have to recreate the entire incident by interviewing the crew, gathering what records they have, and then obviously the physical evidence from the ship is going to be really crucial if the ship had a black box, for example, to recover that.
Okay, Sal Mercogliano, really good to get your expertise on this. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me this evening.